Hi everyone, I'm Kate Kennedy and I'm here with day 68 of 100 Days of Kane, PA. And today we're going to talk with Joanne and Bob Wolf about how the property that they live on today has been used for different types of farms, and some of them I'm sure that you will remember, such as when Anderson's Nursery sold Christmas trees here. So there's some great stories in store for you, and I'm going to go ahead and flip you around. We're gonna walk in and say hello.
Hey.
Hello, Mr. and Mrs. Wolf. How are you?
We're great today.
And this is your family's home.
Yes,
And
it is.
even though you didn't grow up here in Kane or graduate from Kane, your family has lived on this property for many, many years.
That's correct.
And you decided to come back and settle your roots here as well. So could you share with us how you first decided to come back to Kane?
Yes. So my parents, when I graduated, he just happens to have the Baylor shirt on today. So I went to Baylor University in Texas, and then I did graduate work. I went to a seminary, Southwestern Seminary in Fort Worth. But as I studied, I really felt that public school teaching was a ministry in and of itself, and I wanted to do that. I wanted to say that I had actually taught. So after spending some summers in North Carolina, I loved, renewed my interest and love for the Appalachian region. I really missed the change of seasons, and my parents had retired back to the family property. My dad had Anderson's Diner in Bradford, and I wanted to get to know my parents, especially my dad, who had worked for so many years, 7 days a week. So I was investigating teaching opportunities, and my aunt, my dad's sister, Anna Anderson, was good friends with Phyllis and Vern Johnson. So they set me up with an interview, and when I graduated in December of '77, I got a long-term teaching position in second grade. And I listened to the interview of 100 Days with Jerry Milliron, and he was in that second grade class along with his friend Chris Bezak.
That's so interesting. So your first class that you taught was the class that Jerry talked about being his first class that he attended in Kane. How special.
So I came and did that second semester. It was a maternity leave.
Okay.
And then I had the good fortune, I wanted to teach kindergarten. And an opening came that fall of '78, and I was hired.
And how many years total did you end up teaching in the Kane School District?
37.
Wow. A lot of lives impacted and touched by you over those 37 years, I'm sure.
Yes, and I did have the fortune of teaching 2 generations.
Oh, neat. Yeah, that's the thing I love about Kane is you really get to know families. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you are from Kane as well.
Oh, yeah.
How did you guys meet?
We met on, we had our neighbor, or Sue Ellen Snap's mother rented, so she had two or three renting buildings, and we were down on, what is it,
Baird and Welch.
Welch.
Baird and Welch, actually down from my aunt's house.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
So he was working and I was teaching, and the day we actually formally met was the last day of school, 1984.
Oh.
And I was out with my push rotor mower mowing the lawn that my dad called a postage stamp lawn, and he talked to me.
Oh, yeah. So I was trying to think of what could I talk to this girl about. And I had this record collection, so I asked her, oh, do you like music?
Do you like music? The perfect question for you.
There could not have been a more perfect question.
And the rest was history.
The rest is history. 34 years.
Oh, excellent. Well, congratulations. So that's awesome that you guys were working here, that you met, you got married, and you decided now you're living in your family's homestead here. Could you kind of talk a little bit about the history of this house and about some of the farming that went on here?
Sure. So after we married, we lived in that house on Baird. Then we bought a house in Kane's home. But my dad passed away December the 18th, 1998. So he sold Christmas trees to the day he died. And my mom did not want to stay in the house by herself. So then that's when we actually moved into the house after that. But it goes back, our children are the 5th generation to live here.
Wow.
So do you want to look at the picture?
Yeah, let's look at the picture. You show us who's who and
Okay.
tell us about the house.
All right, so this is the house that we currently live in. It doesn't quite look like that. So this is my grandfather, Axel William Anderson. He's a 2nd generation, so his parents came to the country from Sweden. This is his wife, my grandmother, who I never met. They both passed away even before my parents married. This is Augusta Maria Cedar. She came to the United States from Sweden with her 2 younger brothers when she was 16. And my mother often commented with great love that she came and never saw her family again.
Yeah, that's always so hard to imagine when you hear stories like that. She came and she was committed to this country.
Yes, and so it was actually a younger brother came first, and then he brought her. And this is my Uncle Joe, who died before I was born, my Aunt Anne, and then there were 2 more babies born. My dad is the youngest. There was another girl, Hilder, and then my dad, Ben.
So this picture predates the 2 of them.
Yes, and then this is my grandfather's uncle, Augustus Beckeline. He was of ill health at the time, but they built a building which is still standing on the property that we now call the Beckelina, and I don't even know how to write it, spell it. It's just always referred to as the Beckelina. They had him come out here, and his health did improve.
Wow. It's the air in Kane.
It must be, but this is a book, Wood Hicks and Bark Peelers. But I wanted to show this because, and there's not a date, but you can see this is cinema homing. But my dad always talked that Augustus Beckelina would go out all day long because it was clear cut and the blackberries were growing. He would go out all day with milk, the big silver milk. Do you call it a bucket? Or
I guess so.
but the old milk stands.
Container.
Milk
The milk
container.
container, right.
Fill it full of blackberries.
Oh.
Come back at lunchtime, go in the afternoon, fill it again.
How neat.
He would pick enough blackberries so that my grandmother canned enough blackberries so Axel could eat blackberries 3 meals a day.
Oh my gosh. He must really, really have loved them.
And then my dad loved picking blackberries.
Yeah.
And his cousin would come, Francis Johnson, to stay on the farm. And they the whole family loved picking berries.
Do you still do that to this day?
Oh yeah, we have blueberries and the kids loved, we would take our kids out picking blackberries.
That's a nice family tradition. I like that.
And then, so we go back to the house. When my dad, in the cellar of our house, there's an addition behind. This is the front, which is still the front. They put in a sun porch and whatnot. But behind, in our cellar, is Axel William and Axel W. Anderson's signature in the cement, May 1909, and my dad was born July 1909. So they put an addition on the house before the 4th baby was born.
How special that that's right here in this house that you live in
It
today.
is right here. We step on it. And you can see a big beam where the first part of the house, this, and then
the addition.
what was new then.
And one of the things I liked that you shared with me earlier was about the bedroom that your grandfather slept in.
Yes, well, it was, so it
Your
would,
your father.
Joe, and then my dad, Ben, they had a bedroom together at the top of the steps, and my dad called that the boys' room. So when we moved here, our son Jack was in kindergarten, 5, and we made sure that his bedroom was the same, the boys' room. So his
sweet.
bedroom was the same as his grandfather's.
Wow, that's real. That gives me chills to think about that. He was sleeping in the same room that his grandfather slept in, and
Yes.
they grew up in the same room as his grandfather. How special! What great
I know.
memories.
Isn't that a neat story?
It is, yeah. And so at that time, what was their profession? What was your family doing when
So they had a dairy farm, and you remember seeing the picture. It was called the dairy farm here.
Yeah, he had a horse-drawn dairy wagon, I guess, and it had Greendale Valley Dairy on it.
Greendale Valley Dairy. So that was the name of the farm, and it was a horse-drawn
milk
milk.
delivery.
It looked like an Amish buggy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it
Just
did.
about.
Because this was from what time period would you say? The
Late
Late
1800s, early 1900s. There was lots of dairy farming was the big industry in this area at that time. And if you needed a job, that's where you went. You went to the different farms because we have the Greendale Valley Dairy here, and then the Wahlbergs are just up the road, and Ideal Farms is not too far from here.
And then
there's Johnson's Dairy, which was at the end of the road. I think.
that would have been Dad's uncle.
Yeah, I think. What's his name? Olson lives there.
Yeah.
oh,
Jesse
yeah.
Olson, that's
Jesse
his
Olson.
property now. And then there was Olson's, they had a dairy too.
Yeah.
Gosh,
There's
this
also
area.
There's also a turkey farm down there.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
So farming was a big part
Oh,
of
absolutely.
the history of Kane for
Mhm.
sure.
And then I was telling
or
you.
it was a chicken farm. No, it wasn't a turkey. A big chicken farm.
That's so cool. I love that. I didn't know about that.
And then my dad and his siblings went to the Greendale Schoolhouse, which was the Mountain Grange, which is now a private home. So that was just up the end of the road. And my Aunt Hilda, who's not in that picture, she was born between Anne and my dad. She would tell the story that my grandfather on his milk run would stop by the school and ask the teacher if the Anderson children were behaving themselves.
So there's always that accountability here in Kane.
Oh, yes.
From way back then. And it was a 2-room schoolhouse. Was that unusual for this time?
Well, my dad would tease Vic Westerberg, who was a politician. He was a congressman for this district, and he would tease Vic Westerberg, who was from Canesholm, that the Canesholm schoolhouse was 1 room, but he went to the big school. They had 2 rooms. And he did tell the story that they would, play pranks on their teacher and take their stinky socks and put that on the potbelly stove.
Oh no. Oh.
Create a little chaos.
So after the schoolhouse though, he went to Kane High School?
He went to Kane High School. He would walk through the woods that direction, aiming for Kane View Motel. And that's how he would get to school.
Oh, wow.
And then he would go to his paternal grandmother's house on Yarnell Street for beans. And what did they call them?
Bruna Brana. Of course, he had a really heavy, the Swedish accent when he said it. I can't quite get the guttural sounds of it, but Bruna Brana.
Oh, that was the name of the beans that he would eat.
Brown
It.
beans.
And he always said he went to grandma's for lunch.
Oh, and so then he graduated and went away for a while, and he kept in touch with your family through letters.
So when we took Bob can explain the shop. People would want to call it a barn, but it was not the barn. That was a separate building. This was the shop.
Yeah, it was a wood. It was woodworking. They'd have a steam engine in there that would run belts off the ceiling, and that would run drill presses, table saws, a variety of tools like that were in there.
Oh, that's neat.
And they had that on the lower floor, and in the upper floor they had a pool table, which all the guys around this area would play pool.
Yeah.
And this steam engine, it just ran belts off of it, and they would pull it with horses out in the field, and they had all the farmers went together and had a threshing machine, and they would thresh their wheat using that, or oats.
How cool.
And, yeah, so they all pooled their money together, and that's what they did. In fact, her dad was the roadmaster.
Mm-hmm. He was the road supervisor. He actually built and like paved, but I think it was with bricks, the Greendale Road.
No, it wasn't that. They pulled, since they were farmers, they kept taking stones off their fields, and they would build these stone fences along the edge, and they took all those stones on this whole road, and that's what lines the Greendale Road there. So.
How neat is that? That's a great history lesson.
He was very proud of his dad for being the road supervisor.
Yeah, that's so neat. And so he would keep, but your father would keep in touch with your family through letters, and you have some of those letters.
Yes, so here, when we took the shop down, we found this letter that is written to my father in Swedish. My grandmother, Anderson, never learned English. So she wrote this letter, and my dad's name was Benjamin, but she wrote Benny. Aww. And I have two, and I have the envelope, and this was, I took it and did a Google translation to get an idea. It was 1932, and so Dad was 23 years old. His mother was 59. They were sent to Buffalo, and Dad was going to school at Bryant and Stratton. And the touching part is that when we found this, September of 2016, our son Jack was going off to school in Colorado. And when I translated it, it felt like the letter I would write my son.
Aww.
So it starts out that a heartfelt thank you for the letter I received. It's nice to hear that you are in good health and feeling good. Do not work too much. It is enough with school, and this is kind of rough. Otherwise, it will be so over, so you get tired of it. But she wants to help him with, if he needs some money. She tells about who all the people have visited, who's sick, and I have not anything further to write. It goes as usual.
That is a very typical letter, I think, that a mother would write to a son. And
that's right.
It's neat to see that this was so many years before your son goes to college, but it's the same sentiments that you would send.
It is the same thoughts, yes. And she does mention this uncle. So she mentions Augustus Beckeline in both the letters. Uncle is bad, the first letter, and has been for a couple of weeks. He was better for a few days, but he's worse again. But then in the next letter, it says that Uncle is better now. And so that was good to hear.
That's really interesting. I love that. So when he came back, he eventually ended up having a Christmas tree farm here.
Yes, so my dad, he went to Bryant and Stratton. He loved being in school, but he came back. He worked with his brother, Joe, and they did a fruit market in Bradford. And then he went to Virginia, to the University of Virginia. He had a diner in Charlottesville called the University Diner, and that's where he met my mother. They met in the hospital. She was his nurse. And then the war came. And so he had to sell, World War II, he had to sell the diner in Charlottesville. And then after the war, he connected with some businessmen out of Silver Creek, New York. And he purchased this diner in Bradford. And then they married, and so I grew up in Bradford where his business, the diner, was. But then he sold that in 1975, and they chose to retire back here to the farm.
Oh, nice. And when did the Christmas tree farm start, and how did it start?
It's 1935 is what Ben told me. And it took 15 years. So in 1950, the trees were up big enough to sell. And they sold them to the wholesale to the Piggly Wiggly branch. That's the first supermarket franchise. And they were selling, I think he said 170, 150, 175 a tree. But the Piggly Wiggly said they were shot worn and wanted to beat it down to 75 cents a tree.
Oh, geez.
So he battled away with them for years, and I'm not sure when he started trying retail in this area, and I'm not sure when that started.
He did that. I came back in 77, 78, and he was phasing out the wholesale by then. But he had started. The plan was that he and his older brother Joe would do this together. And Joe had retired. Joe had a supermarket right across the street from Dad's diner, so he could get his groceries from his brother. They were in business kind of together. But Joe had retired, but then had a heart attack within a year, I believe, not too long after he retired. So he died in 1953 before I was born the following January. So that was sad that this was to be a brother's partnership, and that didn't happen. But Dad continued then with his mission and desire to have a Christmas tree farm.
So you must have loved doing that, because that takes a lot of work to keep planting, and then to cut and to sell, and to continue that cycle. Yeah,
it's a year-round job, and I still hear from people who in high school had worked for my dad.
Yeah. So when would it have been that he would have started selling the trees here in Kane on Greendale Road?
So 35. It must have been by 1950.
1950 is when they first started selling trees, and it was wholesale at that time.
So that was the wholesale first, and then eventually he went to
by the 70s. He
70s.
was doing retail.
Okay, so people could come out, and I'm sure so many of the people watching and listening are remembering coming out and either buying a tree here or going out and cutting their own tree. That was such a special memory for so many families, a tradition, really.
Oh, it was a tradition.
Yeah.
And then we knew that it just wasn't Bob's passion, and we sold the opposite side of the property to Liza and Dick Greville, so they could raise their family and have the Cleveland heritage continue across the street.
Yeah.
And then when our daughter Frances graduated from high school, which was in 2009, she wrote her college admission essay about the ending of the farm, because she had worked selling trees and doing various jobs, and the transition that she was making to leaving home and a new life. And there was also going to be a new chapter here with the farm winding down.
Yeah. Oh, what a special essay that must have been to read. Yeah. Well, these were great stories. I loved hearing about the legacy of your family here in this home, this very home, and that your kids were raised here, and you guys are still living here. To hear about the different ways the land was used with dairy farming, and then the Christmas tree farm. What a great use of this property, and just thank you so much for sharing your stories. Before we wrap up today, is there anything else that you wanted to share that you didn't get a chance to?
Oh, the pig prize.
Yes.
This was something we found that I thought was so cute. This was when my dad was 10 years old. The letter is addressed to my dad in care of his father, but it says here that they have great pleasure to announce that my dad won first prize in the Pig Club of Kane. And with the first prize, he's going to get a very nice ribbon, but the first prize is a purebred Chester white sow pig, and that's going to be shipped to his uncle down the road. And he's also going to be registered as a member of the Chester White Association of America.
That must have been a really big deal, because how old was he at that time?
10.
Yeah, that's a
He was
huge prize. Wow.
10 years old. Oh, I know we were going to mention a connection with Kane, that my aunt Annie, who had lived here on the farm, she stayed with my grandmother, who eventually became blind from glaucoma. But then after my grandmother died and Aunt Annie was here, she worked at the Kane Summit Hospital as a secretary. But my dad had found a house that she could buy in Kane. It was on the corner of Welch Street and Greaves, and Jarvis Rockwell had previously lived in that house.
How cool is that? Everything is connected.
It is connected. Let's see. We talked about the blackberries and the pig prize. I think that is the main things, but we're very proud to be a member of the Kane community. I feel like it is such a talented town. There's just so many rich gifts that this community holds. And I know you've asked a lot of people about what they love about Kane. And when I say I am from Kane, there is a lot of pride in that our founder was General Thomas Kane and his humanitarian efforts, that rich heritage of being concerned for humanity is a joy to be a part of.
Yeah, well, you guys definitely contribute to what that means for us today. So thank you for all you do for Kane, and thank you for sharing your stories today.
You bet.
All right.
All right, everyone. Hey, that was so interesting. And one of the things that I think is so interesting about what was shared is how many connections to previous stories Mrs. Wolf had in her stories. I think that's really awesome, and it just shows how everybody in Kane is connected one way or another. And the use of the farmland out here, from the dairy farm to the Christmas tree farm, I'm sure that anybody who's watching has a memory, if you grew up here, of getting your Christmas trees here, or maybe even further back of having Greendale Valley Dairy in your home. So if you have any memories of the farm, would you please share them in the comments below? Thank you so much for tuning in today, and we'll see you again tomorrow for day 69.